Here we go! Oh my God! Ow!
We're going to the powder bars. Yeah, this time of the damn year, man, I gotta take advantage of the high water so I can get out there and get the damn logs and come on back in. Well, let's load it up, man. I'll get up here and you hand it to me.
Let's do it.
Remember Shelby Stanga? The crazy swamp logger who used to dive into muddy waters and come up with ancient trees worth thousands of dollars? The guy who wore pink underwear and made us all laugh with his wild stories on Axemen. Well, he just vanished. One day he was on our TV screens making us hold our breath with his dangerous stunts, and the next day he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. So what really happened to Shelby the Swamp Man Stanga? The truth might surprise you. Picture this. A little boy, only 9 years old, getting pulled out of school not because he was sick or moving away, but because it wasn't safe for him to be there. This was Shelby Stanga's reality growing up in Louisiana back in the day. His mom had to make one of the hardest decisions a parent can make. She chose her son's safety over his education because of all the racial problems happening in their area at that time. But here's where Shelby's story gets amazing. Instead of feeling sorry for himself, this 9-year-old kid found his classroom in the Louisiana swamps. Can you imagine? While other kids his age were learning math and reading in regular schools, Shelby was getting a completely different kind of education. His parents gave him a shotgun when he was just 7 years old, and the swamp became his playground. Every day, young Shelby would climb up these massive cypress trees that were hundreds of years old. He'd sit at the very top, sometimes for hours, just watching and learning how nature worked. From up there, he could see everything. The way the water moved, where the animals liked to hide, which trees were the strongest. This wasn't just fun and games for him. This was survival school, and he was getting straight A's. The swamp taught Shelby things no regular school ever could. He learned to read the water like other kids read books. He figured out which sounds mean danger, and which ones meant safety. He discovered how to move through thick mud without getting stuck, and how to hold his breath underwater longer than most people thought possible. All of these skills would become super important later in his life. But back then, he was just a kid having the adventure of a lifetime. As Shelby got older, word started spreading about this young man who could do impossible things in the swamp. People began coming to him when they needed help getting valuable logs out of the water. You see, when trees fall into swamps and get buried in mud, they don't rot like they would on land. Instead, they turn into something almost magical. The minerals in the water soak into the wood and make it incredibly valuable to furniture makers and artists. But getting these logs out wasn't easy. They were buried under feet and feet of thick, sticky mud. The water was so dark you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. And let's not forget about all the dangerous animals living down there. Alligators, snakes, snapping turtles. They were all just part of Shelby's daily work environment. Then something happened that would change Shelby's life forever. Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana, and it was devastating. But in all that chaos, the Discovery Channel was looking for local experts to help with a show called Man vs. Wild with Bear Grylls. Someone told them about this crazy swamp guy who could do things nobody else could do. That someone was Shelby Stanga. His appearance on that show was like lighting a match near gasoline. Television producers couldn't stop talking about this wild man from the Louisiana swamps. Soon enough, the History Channel came calling, and Shelby found himself becoming one of the most famous loggers in America on a show called Axemen. But Shelby wasn't like the other loggers on Axemen. While most of the guys on the show were cutting down trees in forests, Shelby was doing something completely different. He was diving into pitch-black swamp water, feeling around with his bare hands for logs that had been underwater for hundreds or even thousands of years. It was like underwater treasure hunting, except the treasure weighed several tons and could easily crush him if he made one wrong move. The way Shelby worked was absolutely crazy to watch. First, he'd use special equipment to scan the bottom of the swamp, looking for the shape of buried logs. Once he found something promising, he'd put on his diving gear and disappear into the murky water. Sometimes he'd be down there for what felt like forever, digging through thick mud with his hands, trying to wrap chains around a log he couldn't even see. When he finally got those chains attached, he'd signal to his crew to start pulling. Watching a massive, ancient log slowly rise from the swamp was like watching history come back to life. These weren't just pieces of wood. Some of them were older than America itself. They were worth thousands of dollars to the right buyers, but getting them out almost killed Shelby more times than anyone could count. What made people fall in love with Shelby wasn't just his incredible skills, though. It was his personality. This guy was absolutely hilarious without even trying to be. He had this way of talking that was rapid fire and full of energy. He'd tell these wild stories that seemed too crazy to be true, but somehow you believed every word because of the way he told them. And then there were his catchphrases. Every time he was about to dive into the swamp, he'd let out this battle cry, "Here we go," followed by his deep, scratchy laugh that you could hear from a mile away. It became so famous that fans of the show would quote it to each other. Even today, years later, people still remember that laugh. But perhaps the most unforgettable moment in Shelby's television career happened during a thunderstorm. Most normal people would have called it a day and headed inside when the weather got bad. Not Shelby. He decided this was the perfect time to take a bath. He stripped down in the middle of the storm and used the pouring rain as his shower. And just when viewers thought they'd seen everything, he dropped his pants and revealed he was wearing bright pink underwear. Now you might think this was just Shelby being weird, but there was actually a sweet story behind those pink undies. He called them his lucky underwear, and he said his wife Donna had given them to him. It was moments like this that showed people Shelby wasn't just putting on an act for the cameras. This was really who he was, a guy who didn't care what anyone thought and just lived his life exactly how he wanted to. Of course, doing the kind of work Shelby did meant constantly dancing with death. There were so many close calls that it's amazing he survived as long as he did. In one episode, he had a serious accident that put him in the hospital and forced him to take time off from logging. Another time, while trying to move a particularly stubborn log on private property, he accidentally caused a disaster that could have been much worse. But maybe the scariest moment of all was when Shelby described fighting what he called a life-or-death battle with a massive ancient tree. He never gave all the details about what happened, but the way he talked about it, you could tell it was something that really shook him up. These weren't just exciting moments for television. These were real situations where Shelby could have easily died. The dangers didn't just come from the logs, either. The Louisiana swamps are home to some of the most dangerous animals in America. Alligators that could snap a man in half, poisonous snakes that could kill with one bite, and snapping turtles with jaws strong enough to take off fingers. Shelby dealt with all of these like they were just minor inconveniences. He'd wrestle with alligators and joke about it afterward like it was no big deal. What many people don't realize is that Shelby's life was full of incredible stories even when the cameras weren't rolling. He'd tell tales about finding treasure and shipwrecks while diving for logs. He talked about surviving gunfights and even shared a bizarre story about being kidnapped as a child. Whether all of these stories were completely true or not, they showed that Shelby had lived a life that was anything but ordinary. His popularity on Axemen grew so much that the History Channel started dedicating entire episodes just to his wildest and funniest moments. Fans couldn't get enough of him. But even that wasn't enough for the network. They saw something special in Shelby, something that deserved its own spotlight. So they made a decision that would give Shelby exactly what he deserved: his very own television show. On August 6, 2013, the legend of Shelby the Swamp Man made its debut. This wasn't just another logging show. This was Shelby's chance to show the world all the different sides of his personality and all the crazy Ons he could get himself into when he wasn't busy pulling logs out of the swamp. The executive vice president of the History Channel explained why they gave Shelby his own show. They said he wasn't just another swamp logger. He was a force of nature, a man who lived completely off the grid and made money in ways that most people would never think of. They called him a dreamer and a backwoods trader who was always figuring out creative ways to make his next dollar. The new show was different from Axemen in a lot of ways. Instead of focusing just on the dangerous world of logging, it showed Shelby dealing with all kinds of everyday problems in his own unique way. In the very first episode, a storm had swept away his houseboat, and he had to figure out where to live and how to make money to fix the damage. Watching Shelby solve this problem was like watching a masterclass in creative thinking. He came up with all sorts of wild business ideas. He started offering swamp tours to city people who had never seen anything like his world before. He went hunting for wild boars to provide meat for a housewarming party. He even tried his hand at tuna fishing, which was completely outside his usual area of expertise. One of the most touching episodes showed Shelby taking a young neighbor boy under his wing and teaching him all the survival tricks that had been passed down through generations of swamp people. It was beautiful to see this tough, wild man being so patient and caring with a kid who reminded him of himself at that age. But not everyone loved the new show. While many fans were thrilled to see more of Shelby, others weren't so happy. On review websites, the show got mixed ratings. Some people thought it was pure entertainment and loved watching Shelby's energy and humor. One fan wrote that the show wasn't meant to be educational, it was meant to be fun, and it did that perfectly. However, other viewers, especially people from the American South, felt like the show was making fun of their culture. They thought Shelby was being portrayed as an exaggerated stereotype that made Southern people look bad. Some critics said his personality seemed too scripted and fake, which was ironic because the whole reason people loved him was that he seemed so genuine. There were also people who worried about how the show depicted guns and violence. They thought some of Shelby's behavior with firearms was irresponsible and might influence viewers in dangerous ways. These concerns weren't completely unfounded, as we'll see later in his story. Despite the mixed reviews, Shelby's loyal fans stuck with him. For people who had been following his adventures since the Axemen days, the new show felt like a natural next step in getting to know their favorite swamp legend even better. Some viewers compared it to other popular Southern reality shows like Duck Dynasty, saying it had the same kind of humor and down-home charm. But behind all the laughter and wild adventures that people saw on television, Shelby's real life was getting complicated in ways that the cameras didn't show. Success on TV didn't protect him from the consequences of some of his actions, and soon he would face legal troubles that not even his charm and popularity could fix. The problem was that Shelby's way of doing business didn't always line up with what the law said he was allowed to do. For years, he had been working in a gray area where the rules weren't always clear, and nobody seemed to care as long as he stayed out of trouble. But as he became more famous, more people started paying attention to exactly what he was doing and whether it was legal. The biggest legal trouble in Shelby's life started with an incident that happened in 2011. But he didn't get arrested for it until October 2014. That's right. The police had been looking for him for 3 whole years. He was charged with felony theft after authorities said he illegally cut down an ancient cypress tree on someone else's property. Now, you might wonder how someone as famous as Shelby could hide from the police for 3 years. The answer is actually pretty simple. He spent most of his time deep in the Louisiana swamps, where there are no roads, no cell phone towers, and definitely no police stations. It's entirely possible that he didn't even know they were looking for him until they finally tracked him down. When they did catch up with him, Shelby was taken to a police station near a bayou. But his arrest didn't last long. He was processed and released the same day, probably because the crime wasn't considered violent and he wasn't seen as a flight risk. The case caused a lot of controversy because it involved a cypress tree, and these trees are heavily protected in Louisiana. Cypress trees grow incredibly slowly and play a crucial role in the local environment. They help prevent erosion and provide homes for countless animals. Cutting one down without permission isn't just theft. It's considered an environmental crime that can take decades or even centuries to fix. But this wasn't the first time Shelby had run into legal problems, and it wouldn't be the last. His whole way of life put him at odds with environmental regulations and property laws. Swamp logging is a complicated business, where the lines between what's legal and what's not are often blurry. Property boundaries in swamps are hard to define, and it's not always clear who owns what or who has the right to harvest timber. Even during his time on Axemen, legal troubles were a constant theme in Shelby's life. In one episode, he returned to a worksite to find that someone had sabotaged his equipment. This hinted at ongoing disputes with local landowners who weren't happy about his activities in their area. In another episode, he had trouble moving a barge through narrow canals near people's homes, and the homeowners were clearly frustrated with him. Critics had been saying for years that Shelby's methods were wasteful and that he ignored conservation laws. They accused him of causing conflicts over land rights and not caring about the environmental impact of his work. His legal troubles seemed to prove that these critics had been right all along. Instead of trying to hide from these problems, the television producers actually worked them into the show. They turned Shelby's real-life legal drama into entertainment, blurring the line between reality and television even more. In one particularly tense episode, Shelby's timber buyer made an unexpected visit that led to a dramatic confrontation where things didn't look good for the swamp man. The same personality traits that made Shelby a television star, his recklessness, his refusal to follow rules, and his defiance of authority, were also the things that got him into the most trouble. It was like watching someone's greatest strengths become their biggest weaknesses. But the legal troubles were just the beginning of Shelby's problems. Behind the scenes, tension was building between him and the television crew. Shelby had always been a difficult person to work with because he was so independent and stubborn. He didn't like being told what to do, and he definitely didn't like having cameras following him around all the time. The final breaking point came during the filming of The Legend of Shelby the Swamp Man. According to reports, Shelby got into an argument with one of the cameramen. He had apparently warned the guy to stop filming, but the cameraman ignored him and kept the camera rolling. That was a big mistake. Shelby completely lost his temper. He pulled out his .44 caliber pistol and shot directly at the camera lens. You can imagine how the film crew reacted. They were probably terrified and definitely not expecting their day at work to involve someone shooting at them, even if he was aiming at the camera and not at them personally. That moment was the end of Shelby's television career. After the shooting incident, he disappeared from public view without any official announcement or farewell. The Legend of Shelby the Swamp Man ended in 2015, and Shelby just faded away like he had never been famous at all. So what happened to all the money Shelby made from being on television? You might expect that someone who is on 2 successful TV shows would be pretty wealthy, but that's not the case at all. Despite his fame, Shelby's net worth is estimated to be only around $400,000. The History Channel reportedly paid him $70,000 per year, plus extra money for special appearances. But television never made him rich. In fact, Shelby admitted that he was still in debt even after all his TV success. The most valuable thing he got from his television career was a $9,000 flat-bottom boat that the film crew sold to him for just $600. For someone who had entertained millions of viewers, that seems like a pretty modest reward. But money was never really what motivated Shelby. Long before anyone knew his name, he was making a living pulling ancient logs out of the Louisiana swamps. He didn't do it for fame or fortune. He did it because it was what he loved and what he was good at. In 2010, he emne. Today, Shelby lives quietly with his wife Donna on a 3.5-acre property by a river that leads into Lake Pontchartrain. According to people who know him, fame didn't change who he is at heart. He still lives simply and doesn't seem to care much about making money from his celebrity status. Someone close to him once said, "Shelby may like the attention, But it doesn't change who he is. He doesn't fake it. Even though he's no longer on television, Shelby is still out there doing what he's always done. He's still wading through the muck, still pulling ancient logs from the mud, and still living life exactly on his own terms. The years of battling the swamp have left their mark on him. He has scars from snake bites, stories of near drownings, and injuries that remind him of close calls with death. His bank account might not reflect the wealth that some people associate with television fame, but Shelby has something that money can't buy: the satisfaction of living life authentically. In a world full of fake reality TV personalities, Shelby was always the real deal. He never pretended to be something he wasn't, and he never let fame go to his head. Shelby Stanga's story is proof that true character isn't measured by how much money you make or how famous you become. It's measured by how you handle life's toughest challenges and whether you stay true to yourself no matter what. Shelby faced dangers in the swamp that would terrify most people, legal troubles that could have ruined his reputation, and the temptations of fame and fortune. Through it all, he remained exactly who he had always been: a swamp man from Louisiana who loved his work and his way of life more than anything else. Today, far from the bright lights and cameras of Hollywood, Shelby Stanga continues to be a legend of the bayou. He's still the same guy who climbed cypress trees as a 9-year-old boy, still the